Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. Brad Jensen, my friend, finally got you on here. A lot of attempts, a lot of asks. You and I have spoken at a bunch of conferences together. You're the owner of Next Level Nutrition. You've got a team of coaches. You've been doing real well, the industry as a whole. It's great to have you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's good to connect. I had you on my show. I don't know. It was probably a year ago.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, we were like, we need to link up on your show. But you took a break, right?
I took a break, so this is one of the first episodes back. And anybody who's been digging in, hopefully by now, kind of figures out what happened. Where, you know what, we juggle so much. We do so many things. We have podcasts. We end up with, you and me. We're speaking at conferences. We're traveling otherwise sometimes. I have a full-time in-person business, online, you name it. And trying to balance it all, sometimes something gives. But what I noticed was it was very easy for the old podcast format to give because I wasn't feeling as energized or inspired. And for over the 300 episodes, over 7 years, it was conversations, career development, coach stuff, which I think, a lot of people loved, and I think there's a lot of value back there. I know that going forward, I actually want to have conversations that are going to help more of that end user, that general population, that enthusiast, that person who's trying to get started, the person who, just needs the kick every once in a while. And you're great with your media with that stuff. So this is what I'm doing going forward. And the recent podcast, for anybody who's found this through your media, go check out the recent episodes that I've had. My buddy Jack Hallows, my friend Rachel Henley. You guys will, if you like Brad's media, you will like theirs. Or the really deep dive on Zone 2 cardio hybrid training from Dr. Alyssa Olenek. That is a dynamite episode. There's so much more there. So, but you, the Sober Bodybuilder, right? That's your moniker. And obviously you chose that because you come out as, like, it was a long time ago, but you had some pretty dark days. And yeah. I've been on the wrong side of that stuff too in the past. So why is the gym such a powerful place to beat addiction?
Yeah. And I'll say this, man, we're both still in the thick of the trenches with clients. And so our schedules get a little crazy. It's like we're managing all these things and we're both still coaching people. You coach more, but like we're still coaching people. And honestly, I love it. And everyone's like, I feel like you hit this point in business and you're just supposed to stop doing it. And I have before at certain times and I missed it. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to follow the norm. I'm just going to keep coaching. I love doing it. So, yeah, man, how the gym is such a powerful, I got into the gym when I was 14, 15 years old. 14, I was a chubby kid and I found a muscle and fitness and the rest was history. I fell in love and I thought it was so cool. And the minute I got my license, I was at the gym for like 4 hours a day, not working out, but I would just pick these old guys' brains. I mean, old to me, they were like mid-20s, right? I was like, and man, I fell in love with that place. I'd sit in the pro shop and just talk to everyone. I fell in love with bodybuilding and what it could do for me. And so I was into the gym for a long time. I'm 40 now, so that was 16. And I took a couple year hiatus at the very end. What was interesting is so I was in active addiction for about 10 years. And I had some brief moments of sobriety in there from about 18 to 28. Pretty gnarly addicted to opiates mainly. Started with painkillers, moved to heroin pretty quick. And then by the end, a plethora of any other things. I could get my hands on cocaine, meth. And I still lifted for a good portion of that. It was kind of this weird dichotomy as I was an active heroin addict with like track marks on my arm, but I was still pretty jacked. Like I would still like meal prep meals. It was crazy. And by the end, because drugs become so, they're just all encompassing. It just took over. And I didn't go to the gym that last probably year and a half of my addiction. And I was 40 pounds underweight, skinny. And so when I got sober, I was like, okay, I need to go to do my recovery stuff. Like I learned all the stuff in rehab, go to meetings. But a really close second was I was like, all right, I need to not put the gym before that, but it needs to be a close second. And because just the sheer mental health benefits, I look at people who, I've been fortunate enough to help a lot of guys get sober over the last 12 years. And a lot of them come to me and I say, listen, my job's not to be your personal trainer and your coach. Unfortunately for you, I am though. And I'm going to tell you, if you want to work together, I want you to start doing something physical. It doesn't have to be going to the gym like I do. Maybe it's hiking, but you need to start doing something. And the ones who took the message had exponentially better success than the other ones, because I believe this is so much deeper than just getting jacked. Like some of them like, well, I don't want to get jacked. I'm like, I don't care if you want to get jacked. This is just as much about your mental health as it is your physical health. And when they started combining it with everything else we were doing in recovery, I mean, the results spoke for themselves. So I just think it's such a missing element in so many people's sobriety journey.
Are we substituting one addiction for another? And is that a bad thing?
I've never been asked that on a podcast. That's a great question. Absolutely, man. I did listen. So I'm at a place now where, I mean, maybe somebody on the outside would look in and say I'm addicted to, you know what? I think I'm more just super dedicated, and it's a non-negotiable for me today. But there was a period of time. So I did my first show when I got 18 months sober. I remember I said, I'm going to get a year sober. And if I can get a year, then I'm going to look at doing a show. And it just so happened the next show was about 5.5 months away. And so I said, that's the one I'm going to do. So I kind of started pseudo prep then and got into bodybuilding that's where the name came from. I'm no longer a bodybuilder, but I got into bodybuilding for about 2 years there, from about 2014 to 16. And absolutely, man, there was a point where I was like full blown addicted to, I mean, if I had to shorten my workout 10 minutes, I was grouchy and miserable. I was upset. I would think about it all day. Like I obsessed over it. I would obsess with like what I was going to do in the gym. If I couldn't get my meals in correctly, I was super hard on myself. Like it was unhealthy. So yes, I full blown transferred addiction. And even now, one could look and say, maybe I did, but I look at it as I'm just now as dedicated on my health and fitness as I was on getting my drugs. And so I don't know if it's addiction so much as dedication.
Every once in a while, like I put up posts before about, hey, it's okay to be obsessed with your fitness, or, things about, shifting the addictions. And then there's always these people who are perpetually offended by everything that they read on the internet. It's just as bad as like, you're not someone who's ever actually been in the throes of addiction if you think that. And we'll talk about actually like when things cross the line with this for sure. They're definitely, but to tell me you have never experienced, a problem with alcohol or drugs when you equate, like throwing around the word addicted to the gym versus like, what's have you like, I don't, I got to be very careful saying shit like this because you get into eating disorders, and eating disorders, very, very potent and very, very deadly sort of stuff. But I was going to make an off-color joke about there are not a whole bunch of, Seattle grunge band guys who died of working out too much. Right. Anyway, so if anybody's offended by that, I can't help you. I'm sorry. Okay. So what happens when it gets taken too far? Can it get taken too far?
And on that note, man, I agree. And I think it's how we classify addiction. But the reality is this device right here, this phone I'm holding up, is an addiction for so many people. That is, just the sheer addiction to social media. Listen, I'll say this, like at my core, I am recovered one day at a time from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, being addicted to narcotics that were going to kill me. But I am still very much an addict. Like I see it in my behaviors. And so like one could look and say, maybe I'm a little addicted to the gym because I don't miss my 5 days a week. I only did 4 this week. And I was like, maybe I should go tomorrow, even though tomorrow's a rest day because of Christmas, right? I had to miss. And I was like, no, okay, that felt like to me, I'm like, just take your planned rest day. You always do it. Sunday is kind of a recoup day. You meal prep, you do some stuff. And so, yeah, maybe I am addicted, but I think we're all addicted to something. If you want to be honest, if you're truly honest with yourself, all of us have addictive tendencies, and some of us more than others. But I can tell you that being addicted to the gym is being better than being addicted to cigarettes or, chewing tobacco like I was for years. But I think when it gets taken too far is when it starts to interfere with everyday life. I look back to my competing days when I would be in a bad mood if I ever had to miss a workout. If I had a unplanned, like, hey, we're going out, I was dating a girl at the time. We're going out to, I forgot to tell you, my mom's having a party tonight and she's got a big charcuterie board. I would like panic. And because I was like, no, I'm not. So I would bring my food. This was not even like in the thick of prep. I would bring a Tupperware to me. And again, what I told myself at the time is that I was very dedicated, which a portion of that is true. I do think I where I'm at today is a much healthier place where I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll just go eat and do the best I can. Like it's nobody, like I understand the grand scheme of things today. And so I think when it gets taken too far is when you're missing out on life experiences over and over and over, just for the sake of, because you're so addicted to this one thing. Like it starts to, for me, if it starts to infiltrate the relationships that matter in your life, that's probably too far.
The relationships that matter, that's a big thing, because what I've noticed over time is, I will prioritize workouts over, things that maybe don't matter. Like I can look back and I have incredible friends in my life who have been non-negotiables. They're always there. They're reliable. And then there are people who are actually really good friends who fell along the wayside. And there may have been a time where I kind of look back and with a little bit of regret on that. But then, a broader timeline and what's happened with my career, I realized my life is rich with great people. And the people who I was spending my time with before weren't aligned with that. And in order to move in career, certainly, it turned out it was the right thing to have let those relationships go. So, I think it's a balance, because you can take it too far either way. You're literally cutting out good friends. You're skipping time with family just to go to the gym, and really negative obsession. Or the other side of it is people whose approval you're seeking of, whose behavior and lifestyle isn't congruent with the person you want to be.
Yes.
You're always dropping your healthy behaviors to go and spend time with those people. And obviously there's a middle ground.
100%. It's funny. I just posted on my story this morning. The people that throw shade at you for changing your lifestyle or setting boundaries are simply the ones who don't benefit from your shitty actions anymore. That's a them problem, not a you problem.
That sounds very Hormozy. Right?
Yeah.
Hormozy talks
Right.
about this kind of shit, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure I've kind of collected a lot of that from guys like Hermosi and I'm sure I'm not the only first person to say something that exact way. Even that's what's funny. We all think we're so original, but and some of it is
not what I meant, by the way. It's just
no.
it's
I know. Oh, I know. But really, I think the guys that have influence on us that I'm like, yes, I resonate with that. We kind of start emulating some of it because it lands for us. And now different than someone just plagiarizing your stuff, like happens to Andrew all the time. That's a story. But yeah, I mean, there's certain people where if they're, I've had clients where they're like, oh, my girlfriends are just like, why are you doing this help thing? And really criticizing me. And I'm like, because you don't want to go out to the bar for the second night in a row. Like, yeah, those kind of friends, like, I'm sorry, like, if they can't support, it's because they don't benefit them. Your lack of action makes them feel better about their inaction. That's what I've learned about humans is, the aunt that always has to say something if like, oh, are you eating healthy again? It's like that's only happened to me with people in my life that weren't doing what they needed to do. So I think it brings up insecurities in them when you start doing better. And that is exactly those kind of people. Like if they can't, hey, yeah, no, actually, I got plans to go to the gym tonight or whatever, but I can see you after. And if they get mad about that, that's a them problem, not a you problem.
You hit on something big, and let's take that deeper. It's kind of a sabotage. The discomfort people experience when they see you making efforts that they are struggling with, they know they should do. And so that's a stimulus that, again, makes them emotionally uncomfortable. And oftentimes people will try to pressure you into, hey, live a little, like, come drinking with us, whatever. Or, things like donuts start showing up at the office is the kind of classic one, because you've all of a sudden started eating better. And that person in there, they know they're not feeling great. They don't like that aspect of themselves. And it's much easier to make the stimulus go away. You stop the behavior that's making them uncomfortable versus look inward, hard conversation, tough look in the mirror and go, I don't like this about me. Why don't I do something about it?
100%. What's interesting was I had a gal on my podcast named Sabrina Zohar, and she's a relationship coach, and she's got a ginormous podcast, and she came on. I say, listen, this is normally a health and fitness podcast, but I want to talk about relationships. That's your expertise. You're obliged to come on the show. And towards the end of the show, I said, so I just got to ask you, what happens if, and this is kind of on a different note, but same, if I expressed to her the struggle some of my clients experience that are married to somebody who really doesn't give a shit about this. They're maybe like not supportive. They're not like, you're so stupid for doing this, but they're like, oh, cool, you eating chicken again? I'm gonna have pizza. Do you want a slice? Are you good? Like just like so, and what happens is a disconnect starts to happen because the whole lifestyle shifts. And so all of a sudden, instead of sitting there binging your face off watching Netflix, you know, you want to go for a walk with your partner. And they're just like, there becomes this disconnect. And her answer surprised me because I thought she'd be like, well, you know, listen, you love that person. She goes, listen, we're talking about someone's health here. We're not like, hey, you have to be a bodybuilder. But if it's like, hey, I want to go on more walks with you, I think you should start eating a little healthy because I want you around. I want to have some synergy in the house that's healthy, not based around, you know, bad habits. She goes, I don't think that's a problem to, you know, have a really hard conversation. It's like, hey, I need you to get somewhat on board, and not even just for me, for us, and because I care about you. And she goes, absolutely, I've seen that cause divorces because it becomes unattractive to the person who is taking care of themselves that their spouse does nothing to take care of themselves. And so an even greater disconnect. I was surprised. She goes, listen, this is probably not a popular answer, but I think that's absolutely something you could say, hey, I need you to get on board somewhat. And also because I care about you. And I was like, damn, all right. Because that is a disconnect I see. And I think even in marriages, sometimes it's a little bit of insecurity. Like they're getting better, even if it's a subconscious thing, not a conscious thing. Maybe they're not consciously doing it, but their subconscious is screaming like, holy shit, hey, if you get better than me, you might leave me. You're gonna look better. And I'm still doing shitty habits that I don't feel good about. And I've seen it cause huge wedges. And so I think having some hard conversations with people you really care about. I'm one of my best friends was not into fitness at all. And we kind of started growing apart for more than just that reason. But I said, dude, you know, he was like, you always go to the gym. I'm like, I don't always go to the gym. I go to the gym like 5 hours a week. That is not, you know how many hours are in a week? That's not always at the gym. I go consistently to
Oh,
the gym. It's different. And we had a really hard conversation where I just said, dude, I care about you, bro, but it's hard because I don't drink, you drink. That's fine. You want to like order pizza and drink beer. And I'm like, hey, let's like go for a hike or let's go do something fun. Let's bond. And I said, I think you need to start taking your health more seriously, not just for me, bro, as our friendship, but for you. And 3 years later, he's had a remarkable transformation. I've been super proud of him. So, I mean, he hired a coach. I didn't have much to do with it other than that first initial conversation. But
but maybe that was a catalyst for him to. Makes me think of a good friend in my world, and you know, he definitely got kind of on the wrong track for a while. And he was the sort of guy who probably was the main fuel for me drinking more over the years because I drink a lot less. And I'm going to transition to another comment, but he seemed to make a fairly major shift in his life. I'd met him in the gym over a decade ago. He's been back in the gym dedicated. And now I run into him at the gym all the time. So we hang out at the gym, which I prefer a lot better than the drunken and sometimes nastier version of him when he's drinking. And I don't feel good when I'm drinking. And I used to own a nightclub in my late 20s. I did not have a good relationship with alcohol, you know, through my mid 20s into my probably early 30s. And now, like I and this friend actually built my bar, and I have all this expensive scotch and nice stuff. People keep bringing me bottles and stuff, and I drink it so slowly. I'm telling people like, hey, stop bringing alcohol over here when you come over. You know, like actually have some of this stuff. But I like if I'm tasked with the idea of like sitting down and having a few beers, I'm like, no, I just don't feel great the next day. So what I'm noticing is there's more people talking about it. There seem to be more people who are drinking less. There seem to be more people who are not drinking at all. Like I introduced you to my buddy Anthony Zorzetto, who has a lot of media. He's great. I was actually just saw him at Boxing Day at another friend's house for a gathering. And, you know, he again coaches people on sobriety and a lot of the same sort of stuff that you
oh
talk
yeah,
about,
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
right? Great guy. So why are we, is it just like social media is gaining traction, or are people genuinely drinking less or cutting it out?
You know, that's interesting. I would say the latter. And you know, like I remember like there's so people think because when I talk about like, hey, one of the best health hacks you can do is cutting or out minimizing alcohol. And I always get comments like, yeah, says the sober guy, that's called a bias. And I'm like, honestly, like I understand that it could look that way. But honestly, like, I mean, we all went to dinner when we were in Dallas and you and Jordan had some drinks. I didn't think anything of it. Like, I don't like sit there and go, because I know you guys are responsible with it. You're not acting like fools and causing wreckage in people's lives. Just because I can't drink responsibly does not mean that I think that other people can't and or still live a very healthy lifestyle, still look good, still have good blood markers. It's been proven. However, we do know that there's really no benefits, despite what Dr. Mike Israel said. I usually agree with everything he says. And I was like, it was such a bad take on Cody Sanchez's podcast. He was like, yeah, it might have some curious benefits, a couple glasses of wine a night. And I'm like, okay, that's been a little debunked. But
Yeah.
I do think that people are starting to catch on that, it's funny. People will throw around these terms like it's, you know, diet soda. They're like, you're literally drinking poison. I'm like, I don't think you understand the definition of the word literally, because this is not literally poison. If it was literally poison, I'd be dead. It's not. And if I drank 100 a day, sure, just like water, right? And it's funny that I think people are starting to realize, like, oh, I think actual poison is probably alcohol. And again, dose makes the dose makes the poison. I don't necessarily agree that alcohol is just straight poison, because you'd be dead, but I think it has a higher propensity to cause a very negative effect in your body. I actually hate that word poison. I'm like, go drink some bleach and let me know how that compares to your diet soda. Um, I do think that people are starting to catch on that, like, man, like, now we have all these things like Aura rings and Whoop bands, and people see my clients are like, holy shit, did you see my readiness? Just from, because we'll share a little circle on Aura ring where I can like see theirs and they say mine. And they'll drop 20 points in it and like super low just from 2 or 3 glasses of wine one night. And I think people are starting to, like, the more metrics we have to track this stuff, I do think people are starting to realize like drinking is just not advantageous for health. I think more now. I actually think the internet or social media initially was probably worse for drinking and partying. But again, I have a bias because the people I follow are in the health space. But I do think more and more people I'm noticing that never had a problem with drinking, it was not a problem per se, are going sober or partly sober, like, really cutting it down once or twice a month, because people are starting to realize we want to feel good. We want to feel good. And alcohol does not makes you feel good in the moment. But I think, and the older someone gets, I think I think it's harder to recover that next morning.
That's the thing I've been noticing. And like sometimes I can still have a glass of scotch, like just a small glass, sip on it very, very slowly, enjoy it. There was a time in my life when I didn't have a good relationship with it. If I started on alcohol, I found it very, very difficult to stop, right? Once you got going, that was it, right? Whereas now I'm actually sort of like marveled at the fact that's like, okay, I can have a little bit and then I'm good. In fact, I don't want anymore. And there have been a handful of times, especially in the last year, where I was standing in front of the bar. I pulled down one of my glasses. I got these nice Royal Dalton crystal glasses that I was given years ago. And people I've got Tool rock glass. I bought them from the Tool website, right? And then one of my clients, Dal, who's awesome, she's doing nutrition coaching. She actually got me a set of 4 of these amazing little whiskey rock glasses. And they had my logo frosted on them. I'm like, this is amazing, but I have way more glasses than I have the ability to use all these things. And I will sometimes pull down the glass, I'll look at the bar, all this stuff, and I'm like, no. And I'll put the glass back and I'm like, no, I don't feel like having a drink. And that is a far cry from in the past. But a lot of it is like, I just don't feel good. And sometimes like even a drink sometimes can make me feel awful next day. I don't want to affect my workout. My work pace is like, this is a season of like nonstop. I'm up to like midnight, 1 a.m., working on projects and whatnot and relaunching the podcast. And for me, it's not great. Like I was thinking about this, a friend of mine, who over the years have done a fair bit of drinking with, is inviting me to go over and hang out for New Year's. And I'm like, I don't think I want to do that because I know I'll lose the entire day. And I would rather actually, this may be taking it too far, but I want to work on some stuff that I'm working on for, the new year.
I don't think that's taking it too far. I think that's super responsible.
Yeah.
Something that's really important there, and a couple things. One is, and I'm actually curious to ask you a question. A good litmus test that if you might have a small problem with drinking, or a big problem, just a problem, is that if once you start, you have a hard time limiting once you start, or you have a hard time stopping, or if you're someone who says, yeah, I'll just have one drink with the boys. and one turns into six real fast, like you felt like the floodgates opened, that is something you need to zoom out and say, this is a little bit of a problem. People who have a very healthy relationship with alcohol, sure, there's those one-off times where they're like, whoops, one turned into five, now I'm a little inebriated. But most of the time, because it's not what you do a small amount of time, it's what you do the vast majority of the time that matters. They set out to only have one, they only have one. And they're fine with it. And it was a good drink and they enjoyed it and they talked and they left. Um, but I'm curious with you, and I think that goes into sugar too. I hear so many people when I'll do these reels about, sugar, and people think I'm advocating that like donuts are good for you. And I'm like, get the hell out of here. God damn. Like, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, and so many people will comment and say, yeah, well, once I start, I can't stop. And I said, I used to be that way too. And I saw that addictive tendency from drugs and alcohol transfer to food. And I was like, that's why I would be so rigid on my diet. And it was unhealthy, I'm like, I can't, because I had already told myself, and I did some intentional work around that sure, again, do I have those one-off moments where I'm like, whoops, went too far? Absolutely. Christmas Eve was one of them. But for the most part, if I only set out to have one small 170 calorie cookie, I'll do it. Doesn't mean I don't want more, but that came with intentional work. And I think that so many sell themselves short, whether like thinking they just can't ever do that. I try to rewire my clients' brains, the way they talk when they talk about, oh, I would never be able to just have one. I'm like, well, if you talk like that, you sure as hell are only going to have one. Like that's the problem.
That's fixed identity, right? And I
Yeah.
love this.
How did you, was it just maturity and time? Was it growing a business more? Was it anything intentionally you did to get to a point where you went from struggling to limit the amount to now most of the time you can?
I don't think it was anything conscientious or intentional. I think it was just a progression over. We're talking about a very large time scale here, and I think it's easier to kind of look back. And I mean, we are post rationalization machines. We weave narratives about why things happen, and they're usually the more socially acceptable. This topic comes up in the upcoming episode with Jonathan Goodman. It's already recorded, right? So we'll spin a version of things that make us look good, but it just was, as I, got deeper into my career, I think, just the volume of work, the commitment to being able to do it all, I just couldn't lose the time and the energy. I also did not enjoy how I felt. And I mean, when I think about it in terms of like relationships, both friends and, hey, some past romantic relationships, when alcohol was more of a presence, there was a lot more like just straight up toxic behavior. Goes into our conversation for relationships earlier about, the having the right people in your world where everything aligns versus the wrong people. Having the wrong people in your life, can have devastating consequences. And I think now things are far more aligned, right? Like it's, I'm very fulfilled by the nature of my work. And I think the workout certainly, going back a very, very long time scale, it was sort of a choice of that party lifestyle, owning a bar versus the gym. And I struggle to do both well, kind of like you were functioning with it up until a certain point. But I found that I fell off from the gym too. And so in order to get back to that, then the crazy wild party type stuff had to go out the window. In fact, as a transition, when I moved up to Edmonton, I actually just got myself immersed in World of Warcraft for a long time. There's an article on my website that you scroll way down and it'll actually like talk about that. And that was a great place to sort of hide and immerse. And then I got back at the gym and I realized like, full-time gym commitment also couldn't coexist with like full-time hardcore playing World of Warcraft. So the gym went over and then I got hired as a trader off the gym floor. It's sort of a weird story that I sped up through. And, but I look at this and this has been better for me. It's been way more fulfilling. So I think it's just been a life progression. I kind of look back now, oh yeah, I haven't really been interested, but I think part of it's like the spaces I'm in, the environments that, that I'm in and the people that I'm around. And I've noticed that the people who want to drink less, my like really close friends, a few could enjoy a little bit of booze, but they don't want to be out late. They're at that stage of their life. And those are the people I find more alignment with. So I think the people you're around, we know this, your environment, the people you're around has a huge impact on this.
100%, man. Yeah, I love that because that's such a testament that I think there's a lot of habits or, things that over time with the duration of consistency and patience and persistence can handle themselves. like I've seen clients where, I mean, they had such a problem with sugar. We didn't sit there and talk in our sessions or on the check-ins about sugar, necessarily, but over the course of a couple of years of working together, they're like, oh man, you're right. My relationship is so much better with sugar. I can just have some here and there. Like, and the story they told them. So we first worked on stopping to tell themselves they could do, like, I can't do that. I'm like, I said for the longest time, like, I just don't think I could ever be fully sober. So shockingly, I was never fully sober. Like I would get it maybe a month and then, so I think our brains here, it's so important to rewire the words we say. And also the people we surround ourselves with is so important. And again, if you just if you're willing to make small changes over time that add up to big changes, again, if I look at my friend circle, my 5 people I talk to the most, friend wise, now compared to even 10 years ago, which I was sober, it is completely different and evolved. It's men who were have businesses, and that was never like that was never a prerequisite that like you got to be in shape and you got to take your health seriously and you got to be like far along in your career. It just kind of happened because that's the conversations that carry depth and weight with me. And so before you know it, I'm hanging out with people that we have a lot of common interests. And I think the more you progress in this game of health and fitness and just life in general, I think the more you'll see that like drinking and staying up till 2 a.m. is just way too detrimental for the whole next day just gets ruined. I went and spoke at the prison. It was really cool. And there was about 75 inmates. And I told them, listen, you are I said, you are the sum of the 5 average you spend the most time, people you spend the most time with. So choose wisely. And I said, and listen, that starts in here. I was speaking to a group of guys who all of them were going to get out at some point. No one was doing life. I mean, some were 4 or 5 years down the road. Some were 4 or 5 months down the road. Some were in 3 weeks. But they were all going to get out of prison. And I said, it starts in here, surrounding yourself with people that lift you up, that you have common interests with, that aren't, that don't resemble your old life. Because if you can't change in here, you will not change out there. I just think who we surround ourselves with. And Andrew's just like the goat of being friends with all the good guys in the fitness industry. I'm just like, I don't know how all of them. Like anyone Andrew's lined me up with, just ends up being one of my boys. Like it's
James Capola, right? Like
yeah,
you guys see the world. We're not going to get to this side of it, but see the world kind of differently when it comes to some aspects. But
yeah,
really bridge that gap. And he's a great dude. And so anybody listening, so Brett, you have what is God? Why am I Brett? What is your alter ego? Sheena, right? And then James has Tammy, and they're two different kind of personas. So I actually introduced you guys. I'm proud of hell of this, and I suggested you guys needed to do a collaboration between Sheena and Tammy. Now, how fucking popular did that turn out? They loved it.
That was genius, bro. Yeah, it's funny. Like I had seen some of this stuff floating around, and for whatever reason, like we never followed each other. And then Andrew lined us up about something completely unrelated about James's account he got taken down.
Right.
And we just built a good little friendship. And he was like, "Holy shit, you do a girl?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm over the last couple of years, I've had, I don't know, a dozen, 10 comments, probably even more, on my post with Sheena that would tag James and say, "You have to collab with this guy." Ha ha. And I was like, you don't even know this guy. I'm not going to collab with him and be like, hey, but I did know he did a girl. And then he saw I did a girl, and we had some fun with it. He's a riot. So yeah,
He's a really good soul.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring him on the podcast. I actually recorded something. It was actually one of the last episodes that I was working on before I shut it down, but I never aired it because I really wanted to pivot. So I want to bring him back and just get everybody to see, how, he's a great dude. Okay, a little pivot, but it's actually kind of back to what we were talking about. And this is kind of interesting. So I've always thought about this. So this is back to identity. I understand. I can't remember where I read this, but I think statistically, people who think of themselves as non-smokers have better rates of success than people who think about themselves as ex-smokers. Now, alcoholism and drug addiction tend to, at least through the Alcoholics Anonymous lens, tend to, think about yourself as always being an addict, I think, to stay vigilant against the risk of relapsing. And those are two different things. So on one side, one identity, and for me, I got to think about the heavy drinking and owning a bar and all that sort of stuff. And to me, that feels like it's memories of like, kind of like watching someone else's life in a movie. It doesn't feel like who I am. So my identity is not at all rooted in someone who was like that 20 years ago. Whereas you obviously, like, it's literally in your moniker as an ever vigilant thing. Do you think that it's circumstantial, depends on the person? Any insights on that
Yeah.
dichotomy?
No, this is a great conversation because you know what? I've had this conversation with some people because I'm really big on what we say, you know, how we identify ourselves. We get stuck in these traps. I mean, you know, even just for the first portion of my career being sober again, I climbed up the ladder pretty quick at this company and was the top guy and was making decent money. Not fantastic, but way. I mean, I was homeless like a year and a half prior, and I remember I had this identity that like, whoa, I think I don't know if I deserve this much money. And so I got this fixed identity that I only deserve a certain amount. So guess what? I found a way for years, no matter what, to only take home that set amount, even though I was trying to take home more. Like it's almost like subconscious ruled and was like, nope, you only believe you deserve exactly this amount. So this we're going to give you again. It was nuts. And once I flipped that, things dramatically changed. Here's the thing about the Alcoholics Anonymous thing, because I've had people say, well, you say that, but yet in AA meetings, you say, hey, I'm Brad, I'm an alcoholic, and then I share. And I said, I totally get that. And I can see where for some people that can be very detrimental. So I do think it's the person. Here's been my experience with that. And you hit the nail on the head. It is remembering because at this point, 12 years later, and I've seen this way too many times that I have a healthy fear of this happening. I don't know if it's a fear, I have a healthy respect. There's a better word of I've seen people get 10, 12, 15 years, build a completely different life. I knew guys that had lots of money and within they relapsed, they went back out. They thought, oh, you know, I could probably just have a couple drinks. A couple drinks turned into a couple bags of cocaine, turned into pills, turned like whatever. And then 2 years later, they've lost everything and they're back to square zero, getting in rehab. And I've seen this happen so many times that I'm like, okay, I believe based off my prior 10 years that I would get a little sobriety and I'd be like, I could just have a drink. And sure, does it cross my mind sometimes? I'm like, it's been 12 years, but I'm like, I am not going to risk it. For me, actually saying that I'm an alcoholic or I'm an addict is actually a very empowering statement for me because it's one of the greatest gifts I could have gotten because it taught me so much and it connected me because I'm not a religious man by nature, but I am deeply spiritual. And because that is kind of the premise of AA that people don't realize is that it's you got to find a God of your own understanding. And like Bill Wilson, who created AA, was like, I don't care what it is, just know it's not you and connect with something deeply, a relationship with God. And so for me, so much I learned about being a man and connecting with my God. Like, how do I connect to God? What is that? What is this thing? What do I believe in? How does it guide my life? I don't know if I would have found that. And I'm sure I would have eventually if I hadn't been an alcoholic. And now I get the chance to be of service and help other people trying to get sober. So for me, when I say I'm Brad, I'm an alcoholic, it's not like this. It's to remain diligent that I believe for me, it was not just like a fluke phase for 10 years to end up homeless. Like I was bad for 10 years. It wasn't a bad year. It wasn't a bad 6 months. It was a bad decade. And so I've admitted like I cannot safely drink or use, and I am totally at peace with that, nor do I even want to. So for me, when I say it, it's not this detriment of like just an alcoholic. Cause same thing. When I tell my story at length, I legitimately at this point, because I've been sober longer than I was in active addiction, I feel like I'm telling it about somebody else. Like I don't even relate with that guy. Like it's like I'm telling the story, but I'm like, and there's certain moments that I tell the story about my mom when I finally got sober that night that I'll get hit with the emotion and I'll cry because I remember it vividly. But so much of the other stories, my fiance was asking me some stories and like time, tragedy plus time equals humors, whatever they say. Like we were laughing about it, but I was telling her these stories and I literally felt like I'm telling it about somebody else. Like it's not even about me
Mm.
because I am not that person. But for some people, saying over and over again, hi, I'm Bob and I'm an alcoholic could actually be detrimental. And so I understand why Bill Wilson and Bob, who created AA, said, like, I think this is really important to remember who we are and stay vigilant against the drinking. But I also think I've shifted some of that where I used to get really defensive and I was like, no, this is what helps me stay sober. And then I started seeing some people that it wasn't good for. Because they related being an alcoholic with something negative. And at this point in my sobriety, I'm like, oh, it's my superpower. Like, I'm so grateful I went through all that because I would not be the man I am today. I would not have the gratitude I have today. So, really long-winded answer. I think for some people, they need to be cognizant of every time they say that in a meeting, it brings something up that's negative. I think that's something to look at, and their association with that is clearly not in a place that it's a positive thing. For me, it is, and I don't ever say that and feel less than or feel I mean, it's right there in my bio. I feel like it is. People appreciate a good comeback story, and it's part of my life and it's part of my story, but it's not who I am.
I like that. And I'll take from your answer that I think it depends on the individual and how they want to look at it, because I think you're sort of sit in a middle ground that's quite nuanced versus this very rigid, no, I am not, or yes, I am. Because we've talked a lot about addiction, your history, philosophy. How can the person listening, because there's still a lot of coaches listening to this, but the everyday user, either if you yourself, the listener, is in some way struggling, right? Still on shaky ground, maybe doing better from the past, or if you have somebody in your world who is definitely struggling with this stuff, how do you help yourself? How do you help them? What's some of the first steps?
Well, we talked about some of them. For you personally, I mean, I think one, just a note to everyone out there. I think that everyone should, when people do like dry January or whatever, and I know some people like make fun of it. I'm like, I think it's great for anyone just to see how they feel and prove to themselves that they can go 31 days without drinking. I think that, but as far as the person who's maybe still kind of struggling, we talked about it a lot. I think you've got to change the influences and the people you hang out with. Like, I know that you love, Sarah that you went to high school with, but she goes to the bar 2 nights a week, every weekend, or drinks mimosas on brunch and like wants you to come. But it's one of the most powerful words in the English language I learned was no. Like, and that's a complete sentence. Like, no, like you can be nice and say, no, thank you. I'm not going to come. But changing who you surround yourself with or some of those influences, even a little bit, doesn't mean you have to cut these people out of your life completely. I still have friends who drink. I don't care. But also like they're very responsible with it and they live really productive lives and we connect at a deep level. And if they want to have a couple beers when we talk, I don't care. So I think changing that. And then number two, I just kind of said it. I think that for me, I wouldn't have gotten sober if it wasn't for some kind of spiritual connection. And if you're religious, great, but that's not what I'm talking about. And sure, you can find spirituality through religion, but they're inherently kind of two separate things that play the same game. Religion is like playing football with like an organized game where there's a ref and he's blowing the whistle and they're like, hey, you're offsides. Spirituality is like picking up a football, going with 5 of your buddies and going and throwing it around in a park and playing this game, but it's free form. You're just kind of playing it to win. There's not a lot of rules, but it's still the same game. So you can be spiritual and not religious, or you can be religious and not spiritual. I know that firsthand because that's how my father used to be. Or they can often intersect and you can find some spirituality through religion. But every time I try to preface that by saying, I'm not saying you got to go to church. If that's where you find your spirituality, cool. I don't go to church and I connect spiritually every day. I pray, I meditate, I do some journaling, even just going on outdoor walks. And sometimes no music, no podcasts, and I'll just kind of just be out there in nature. That's how I connect with God. Some people do that through hiking, yoga, whatever it is, but do something that feeds that spiritual side of you. And it's up to you. I think it's your path to pave to figure out what that is. But I talk about this help being these four-legged chairs. And I used to go real hard on this. It's kind of like the motto of my business back in the day. I'm not talking about as much anymore, but I realized people come to us for the physical health. But I'm realizing, okay, that's one leg of the chair. But if we don't have some habits in place in the mental, your mindset, your emotional health, and your spiritual health, you're just going to be balancing on an unwobbly chair. And if we can get all of those kind of sinking good, the chances of you feeling stable and more sturdy is significantly greater. And so I think to that person, do something to connect spiritually. And if you don't know what that is, start trying stuff, start going to yoga, start doing meditation, you got to try things and see like, where do I feel this peace and serenity? That for me is when I've connected spiritually. It's not any more complicated than that. And to the person who's struggling, it's hard because ultimately what got me sober was my parents finally, I wasn't married, didn't have kids, thank God. I didn't have a kid because I would not have been a good dad. I didn't get sober until they finally cut me off. And that was after 9 years of trying and them trying way harder to get me sober and spending $70,000-$80,000 to send me to all these different treatment centers and watching me go incarcerated and come out a year later and then relapse and stealing their money and all of this, that they finally said, hey, until you're sober, you're not coming around here. We love you. They let me know that. They said, we love you more than anything, but we're done. And when you finally get sober, we will be here. But until then, you're not allowed to call. You're not allowed to come around. And I wouldn't have got sober for that because my mother was a great enabler. She loved me, but almost loved me to death, literally, because she would save me. When I was about to hit rock bottom, she'd put a little pillow under because she loved me. She was trying to help me, but I would just take advantage of it. Now, on that note, so if it's somebody that has caused absolute tornado havoc in your life, I think that's the point you have to get to. And if you feel like you've tried to help that person get sober more than they have, that's where you have to put in some boundaries. And ultimately, they might die, but here's the kicker. They might die anyways. That's the problem. And in fact, I had a better chance of dying probably with my mom saving me and giving me money when I was, than having to be homeless and all by myself for a year and figure it out. But if it's not to that point, I think the best thing is addicts, when they're that deep, they don't love themselves. So reminding them that they're loved and like, hey, I care about you. I think boundaries is the best thing you can do. Don't allow them to wreck your life, but also let them know you're there for them. And sometimes an addict just needs to talk and they're just in a dark place and they just need someone where they can get raw and real and vulnerable. And that might be the first step. Maybe you just listening without judging and just holding space for them is the one thing that gives them a catalyst to go change themselves.
Brother, that was amazing. Obviously, while you do sometimes talk about these themes on your media is probably still very general fitness, general nutrition, myth busting, fun reels, Sheena being Sheena. So where can people find you on social media? Any key resources you want to direct them to?
Yeah. I'm just at the Sober Bodybuilder on Instagram. That's where I hang out the most. And you're going to see mostly fitness stuff. You're going to see a sprinkle of some sobriety stuff and then a sprinkle of some, being a dad and life stuff. But the majority of my content is still geared towards people in there, just trying to live a healthy, fit lifestyle, because that's who our company caters towards is Gen Pop. We don't do bodybuilding shows. We don't do advanced gut health cases. We help, average parents, mostly moms and dads, learn to put themselves first in a healthy way with their lifestyle and while also still showing up for their obligations. And so, and also my podcast, we have about 680 episodes at this point. It's it used to be the Key Nutrition Podcast. Now it's the Next Level Podcast. And that's on all platforms, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. So, and then our website is just becomenextlevel.com. So.
And I was a guest on your podcast. It was actually one of my favorite recordings. I remember that. It was wonderful. Okay. So a couple things real quick. Everybody listening, go follow Brad. Please dig into what he's doing, share his media, share this episode with someone in your world who may be going through some of the stuff we talked about. Okay. Second thing, as of time of release, I just started my next round of my online women's group strength program. It's a 13-week program. Message me if you're interested, whether you're a coach or a general enthusiast. This thing's dynamite. So my intake's still open. I would love to chat with you about that. I will tell you more. And as we talked about at the very beginning of this episode, the goal here is now to get this podcast, these episodes, and my guests in the hands of more of the general population coaches. You guys are still going to love this stuff, but share this, take this, share it with the person who you think it'll make the biggest difference for. And thank you for listening, Brad. Thank you. You're an amazing guest.
Thank you. And if you guys are anybody struggling out there with anything in this area, those are the DMs I'm probably the most apt to respond to quickly and shoot you a voice note and see how I can help. Even if it's just sharing my experience and proving to you that you too can get out of whatever situation you're in, because the odds were not in my favor. So thanks for having me on, dude. This was a blast.